Are we
Oh, we're
live?
live.
We're live. There it
That
is.
was
What?
fast. It
That's
must
the
be
first time I
Wednesday.
actually saw it. It's in 1 second.
Yeah, it's Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
Right? It's Wednesday. What's going on? Dude, you know what? I got to tell you, I'm actually rather enjoying this weather right now. It is
Oh
really
yeah,
nice.
today was
Yeah.
fantastic. This morning sucked. I went out. I walk 6 miles every morning, and it was 38 degrees, and I'm like, "Pooh,
No,
man."
we're not that cold here right now. We're in the 40s, mid 40s, kind of. But during the day, it's like hot. So it reminds me, and it's really dry out. So it's actually really nice. It's
Yeah, this
right up
is the
my
best
alley.
season of the year
Yeah.
in Tennessee. Piece of cake.
This
I
one,
love it.
and I think spring, man. I think I like spring a little bit too. You know.
Well, when I first moved here in 17, our first spring was 18, and it literally lasted like less than 48 hours. Right? It rained for 48 hours and then was hot, and it was like right
Uh,
into summertime.
yeah, we got here. In fact, it's funny that you guys you're talking about that because yesterday or the day before actually was the day we pulled into our driveway 3 years ago. Um,
Oh,
we were
sweet.
in the RV. Yeah, we got here on the 17th, I think, or the 16th at 12:05. You know, that's at midnight. And so yeah, that was a it's been 3 years, and so we got here at this time, and I remember that it was a little muggy out, but it wasn't crazy when we got here. But then we went right into the awesome time right after that. So it was actually rather nice.
Is my mic sounding funky?
No, you sound good. Does mine
It
sound funky?
it does.
Really?
Yeah, it's sounding kind of funky.
Oh,
It's doing the funky chicken over there. Sounds like you're almost like in a tube.
oh.
Did we have
How
this
does my
problem before?
how does my mic sound? Everybody out there in the chat land. I can try to go to. Let's go to settings. Audio and mic. It says test. It's on. It's good.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, see, Seth McFulton saying it sounds muffled.
Really?
Yeah, it does. It sounds garbly.
Huh.
Yeah, A Cove is saying sounds like Shane is underwater.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, unplug the mic and plug it back in.
Okay.
Did you
All right.
unplug it? Did
Whoop.
you unplug it and plug it back in?
How's that sound?
No, it
Yep.
sounds the same.
What?
Is the
I don't
red
know.
light on? Is the red
Yeah.
light on? Huh.
Red light's on. I'm checking that.
Because your sound never went away when you unplugged the mic.
Here. Let's see. Microphone here. Yeti. Let's try.
All right. Does that sound any better?
Man, you're sounding way better now. I can hear you.
Really? Okay, good. Good. Awesome. Right there?
Huh. I am. I'm just looking at the stuff over here in the chat, and it looks like
Okay.
you're we have competition on Wednesday night now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it looks that way. Yeah, that's what Lout Burns is saying.
Well, whatever. Okay. Well, anyways, let's go right down through the list. We got Mr. Rodders. Mr. Rodders Neighborhood is in here. Dan, we got Twisted Mopar Garage. Aaron, Wanna Nana B 2B. Slant Daily Garage. We have Aaron. We have D150. We have Kevin. We have Cove. We have Rick. We have Aaron. We have Colleen. We have Mr. John Wilburn. We have Dan. We have Colleen, Mr. Wilburn, the bringer of the No Name Nationals. And we got Colleen, Turbo Man, Dan, Seth, Cove, Dan, Michael Schmidt, Lout, Rapid Transit. Ooh, with the Linko Dart. Is it no? That's
That's the
not
NSB
them.
Customs guys.
Yeah, it's NSB Customs. I was actually looking at NSB Customs when I said that. So we got Cove, and then we have NSB Customs with the Linko Dart. We have John, we have Dan, Dust Devil Garage, and we're there. Awesome. So, anyways, I think I found something wrong in the book here. In my magical book, we're gonna go full John Wilburn here. Right here.
If it was John Wilburn, you would actually have to like, I don't know, you would have to take a picture of it on with your phone and then
And hold it up to the
there.
camera.
Yeah.
So now, whenever I do anything, I always check with the book. I call it the Bible. And then, but I did find something wrong in here. Now I know for a fact that the stroke of a slant six is 4/125, right?
Uh-huh.
But in here, can you see that? Right there,
4/120.
4/120. You think that that's a slight misprint, but if you read the wordings right below that, it's hard to do this, but it says right there, stroke of a slant six is
4/120.
4/120, and it says that about 7 times in this book. Now, I know for a fact. So what I did is this last video, I was trying to figure out what was wrong with this slant six, because it really has lack of power. And so, I did a compression test on it, and then obviously I did all the math for it. And then when I looked at the book, I was like, man, it says 4/120. So I did it both ways, and it really came out to like 7.67 and 7.68 as far as one to compression. So it's really, as far as the amount of error, you're talking about less than 1% error. So it's not really a big deal. But I did it. I did it both directions. So, but yeah, I know it's 4/125. In fact, I have 4 crankshafts out there that I went out and measured just to make sure, and it's 4/125.
Yeah.
But in my video, I just happened to put the video in there where I show the compression, and it just happened to be the 4/121 instead of the 4/125 one, because I did it both ways. Also, too, one thing that people didn't notice is that I did the deck height. So I put in the video 205, the actual deck volume from the piston to the deck.
Uh-huh.
But in the math, I did it on 200 because I did it in 4 different ways. I did it with 200, with a 4/125 and a 4/120, and then I did it with 205 with 4/125 and 4/120. So just to see what the difference is, and it made less than 1% difference in all that. So it didn't really make any difference.
It was negligible, yeah.
It was so negligible. It's a percentage of error type thing. So
well, we've already got a tech question here. I don't know if that's the first one. Let me look real quick. Anybody else have a question?
It's the first one I
Yep, that's the one I was thinking.
Yep, that's the first one I saw.
First, I didn't know. Okay, to answer a question like that is kind of ambiguous, because if I give you a machine shop, it's in California and you're in New York, it's not going to work for you. First off, where are you located at?
Yeah, that's the first thing. And also, too, the thing is that most slant sixes are really easy to do the machine work for them, because it's just one. They basically deck it, and then they bore it. And then really it's at it. Most of them are not going to have a torque plate for a slant six. So just know that. They're just not going to have.
And they're not going to buy one for one engine.
No, because that's all they're going to ever do is that one engine. Because most of them are still running and no one really does anything with them. Now, the place that I used to do is Mitchell.
He says he's in Cincinnati.
Oh, he's in Cincinnati? I don't know anyone in Cincinnati. I don't. But in San Diego, I know of 2 places that are really good, and then one in Memphis. BB&T here in Memphis area, they're awesome. Oh, and then in San Diego, Total Performance, and then my man Mitchell at Cogswell Motorsports. They're the ones who did the last machine work on my last slant six. So the one that's 30 over.
BB&T is actually in South Haven, right?
Yeah,
and the only reason I know that is because they used to do 5-liter Ford parts, and that's on my travels home when I was coming from. I used to be stationed in Pascagoula, Mississippi. My parents lived in Illinois, and I would drive straight up 55, right? And I would always stop there at BB&T in South Haven and pick up parts. And but they used to be big in the 5-liter stuff, so now they do everything, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they do everything. That's why I was saying Memphis area, because anything in Memphis, I get sketched out there. So BB&T is as close as I'll go to Memphis area.
Well, he's saying that the party's willing to travel maybe 200 miles. So you're looking at anything essentially in Ohio area, or actually, if you're in Cincinnati, you would consider Kentucky as well. Man, I tell you what, the furthest north I go is Springfield, Tennessee, and that's for Tommy's Auto Machine in Springfield. And I've had really good luck with those guys, but I haven't done anything any more further northeast than that.
He's saying Jason's Garage Incorporated in Cincinnati area. He may know someone. So yeah,
Yeah.
check that out. That's a
Yeah.
good one right there.
Jason's Garage, he can probably tell you he did a really good job on whatever he was building.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and here's another one too. Dan saying that there's a shop over on the border in Indiana, but I can't think of their name, but I've seen their magazines and such. Yeah, I mean, basically that's a simple Google search. Just I would look for. And one thing I don't one thing that I hate to do is I hate to like go up and just like Google search something and just look for the 5 stars. But you can usually tell the people who are just like Karens, and they'll just give them a 0 star, and you're just like, dude, obviously you went there for a reason because they're good, and you're just butthurt because they didn't tell you what you wanted to hear.
Huh.
Your stuff sucks. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, well, John Wilburn's saying Chris from Buster Radio Garage is in Kentucky, but closer to Cincinnati. And he may have somebody who's done some work for him. I mean, really, it doesn't have to be somebody that specializes in an entire slant 6. Anybody can rebuild any engine, right?
Yeah.
But what you want is you want a machine shop that's meticulous with the machine work. And when they're meticulous with the machine work, they're meticulous in the assembly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
And as the Slant 6, though, I would always recommend you doing it yourself. It's a really simple engine to do. It's really, there's only really one way to put it in. You can look at the pistons. It tells you which way to go. The rod bolts are pretty simple. Everything's pretty simple on that.
I doubt anybody throws ARP rod bolts in a Slant 6, right?
They actually they do have them.
Do they
They
really?
have them where you can press them out there like the wave lock bolts.
Huh.
They're old school, but yeah, you can get them. But the only thing I did on mine is I pressed the old. I kept the rod bolts in there, but I changed the rod nuts. But that was on the racer one that I did for someone. So
Well, you don't, even in your hot rod application, what's the max RPM they see? 5,800?
yeah, 6,000 because your piston speed goes way up too much at that
Well,
point.
you got that big stroke, right?
Yeah,
And that's where it gets to
and-
be sketchy.
Yeah, that's where it gets to be sketchy. Now, there's people who do spin them 6,500, and there's I've heard of people going higher than that. I've never actually seen it, but there's a video of a guy who's doing them, I think 6,000. Mine, I don't really take over 5,500 because at that point there's no more airflow in the head, so you would have to have some sort of either turbo or some way of pushing air in there, nitrous, turbo, or supercharger of some sort to get over that.
Right, that's because it's got such a small bore, shrouds the valves pretty bad.
Yeah, and the not only that, but just the valve, just the head flow in general. It's like 160 something cc CFM. It's just crap.
Oh, so that means the max horsepower one you could build is 320 horse.
If you could get the RPMs up there, and the problem is you can't get the RPMs up. So yeah, it's now the factory they're 145 CFM, around there. When you do back cut the valves and then you just do a little cleanup in the bowl, which I found to be the most bang for your buck, that's right around the 160 mark as far as CFM. There's people who've got 170 or 180, but I mean they're really porting them out, and then you're changing the valves, valve size, valve diameter, the stem diameter. And
Well, Zonda 2B is saying that he's read stories of the engineers turning the 170 to 7K, and that's
Yes.
okay. That's very feasible because there's a couple of things that happen. One, it's got the smaller main, so the bearing speed's a lot slower, right? But it's also got a much more comparable bore to stroke and rod to stroke ratio.
It's actually correct. It's got a 3.4 bore with a 3/125 stroke. So yes, you're absolutely right. That one could go because your piston speed doesn't go through the roof. But see, with the 225, you have an inch longer stroke. You have a 4/125 stroke,
Yeah.
and with the same bore. So yeah,
It sounds like the 170 is what you need to build, Shane, because if the head flow is 160, you could easily get 320 horse out of that. And if you think about it, 170 cubes, that's almost 2 horsepower per cube.
if I could find a 170, I would turbo it because that's your RPM. That's where your power's at.
Yeah.
Because then you have good head flow, and then you can turbo it and then RPM it.
It'd be worth trying to find one.
Dude, they're actually hard to find. I've been looking for about a year and a half.
I know it took Tony from Uncle Tony's Garage to find one. It took him like 2 years to find one. I think John Wilburn brought it down to him.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Here's another one. Another is Paul's Automotive Engineering, Blue Ash, but they specialize in Mustangs, Fords. Well, you know what? That's fine. If they do it Fords at 300, it's about the same. So yeah, I mean it's the same thing.
Like I said, you're looking for meticulous machine work, and generally meticulous machine work means meticulous assembly.
Yeah, and we have BRGs in the house.
Well, and BRGs, who we were just talking about. So, are you guys at Busted Radio? Are you pretty close to Cincinnati area? And if so, can you recommend a machine shop that would be pretty good at putting together a slant six?
Oh, so he wants it assembled by them also?
Correct. Yep.
Okay,
he wants it built at the machine shop.
Yeah. It honestly well, I can't really say that because until I find out what's going on with this one, it's really hard to mess up a slant six, really, because this will be the first one if I find out what's going on, what I think's going on. But in my last video, I've got this Gilbert slanted sled right now going in. We took the engine out, popped the head off, and I did all that stuff. You can watch the video. It still doesn't really tell me why I'm getting 165 CFM, I'm sorry, PSI of crank gear pressure. I'm really thinking that the camshaft is off. I'm thinking it's a tooth advanced. That's just the only thing I think of because that thing's just gutless to all end. Yeah. And in fact, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find true TDC. I'm going to make sure that the mark on there is TDC and it's not like super retarded. So
right.
That's the first thing I'm going
to do. Aren't they vulcanized rubber, just like all the other harmonic dampeners, right? To where that thing can spin.
Well, on the early slants, they didn't have a timing mark. There was no into the.
Oh, and that's right. It's an early one too.
64, yeah. So anything that's really early like that doesn't have it. So there you can see where there's a bolt, and they bolted on timing tab. So but now they come with. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't have a timing mark. It doesn't have a timing mark that's cast in or actually part of the timing cover. It's bolted on. It goes into the two bolts. So, I'm not really sure. So I'm going to check that out first.
If you can take a harmonic dampener off a later one and just put it on that early one and see if the timing marks will line up somewhere.
Yeah, in fact, that's funny you say that because a lot of the timing harmonic balancers you can buy aftermarket have two marks on them, and they're about 90 degrees from each other or something like that, 60 degrees.
Huh.
So it's got both marks on them, and that's why when I build them, I always make sure I find the right one first, and I mark that one, and I don't look at the other one because I've seen that mistake. Someone came in and the thing was just detonating, like idling, detonating, and he had 10 degrees plus that 30. It was probably 35 degrees or 60 degrees, whatever it is, from one mark to the next. So yeah, it was bad.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I'm surprised it still had head gaskets in it.
Well, because they don't really have much, they don't really have much more, compression. So it just is what it is. So other than that, how you been doing, Dallas? I see your video.
Well, I haven't done a video in a while. I did do a couple pictures I shared around Facebook. Yeah. I got the fuel system all plumbed up on the T-Bird to the throttle bodies up top. So now I got 16 injectors installed. Which equates out to 80 pounds per hour for fuel. So that's enough for like 1,200 horse or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I should be plenty fine with that, considering the engine doesn't make that kind of power at all. But it was just enough to get outside the scope of the 42 pounders I had in there to begin with.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can find that extra. Well, also, with the extra injectors in there at the top, in the throttle bodies, it's going to have a cooling effect on the air flowing through the intake manifold. So that charge cooling is what I'm kind of leaning towards. That should be pretty much 20 to 30 more horsepower, and then having enough fuel to feed it all will make even more horsepower. So we'll see how long the C4 lasts, if I get to make a couple passes on it or whatever. But I'm hoping to get it down in the fives. It won't be this weekend. I got to take my son camping with Boy Scouts, so it'll be probably the following weekend.
You know, it's funny because we have a camping trip also for our Boy Scouts,
Oh, this
our
coming
Cub
weekend?
Scouts. Yeah, this coming weekend. Yeah, we got it's whatever place here, South Haven area, but yeah.
Yeah, ours is Pirate Adventure. So
Oh, who was doing the LS headed 300? Was that Tall
that's
Garage?
Tall Garage. Yep.
I was going to ask him how's that coming along. Have you seen a video on that? I totally forgot to
He
look this week.
he shot me a video clip of him turning the motor over and all the rock arms are moving. So he's like, "That's a positive sign. Should run."
That's
And I'm
awesome.
like, "Well, now the next step is, will it hold water and will it hold oil and will it not mix the two together?"
That's right. Doesn't become a milkshake, right?
Right.
It's awesome. I've been really interested in that. I think that's awesome. It's way better than the. I did look for the other ones, and those things were conceived, done and built in seemed like months, right? I just like the fact that you look at Tall Garages. He's been doing this for a little while, you know.
Uh-huh.
So I like that. That's
Well,
awesome.
he was just like me. He had a lot of things come up.
Hmm.
But say A Cove is saying, Dallas, if the C4 won't handle it, what will you change it to? Actually, when the transmission started flaring up in high gear, because that's usually where a C4 starts having its problems, is
Yep.
going into high gear. They flare up. It sounds like you have a stick shift because it'll zing to the moon when you throw it into high gear, and then it'll drop back down. So I'm assuming it's has something to do with the clutches being applied at high RPM or
Yeah.
under high load. But it just so happens when it started flaring up like that in high gear at the No Name Nationals, lo and behold, on my way home, Mr. Andy Wood, who hasn't popped in here yet from Unity Motorsports Garage, says, "Hey, I got the pieces to fix that. We're going to," there he is right there. Speak of the devil and he shall appear, right? He said, "I got the parts. We'll get that thing calmed down. It's usually worth a tenth when they start flaring up like that."
Hmm.
So if I can get it to run like a 590, 580, somewhere around there, it should run a tenth faster than what it does run.
I think the first time if you get into the fives, I'm going to predict a 595.
A 595.
Hmm.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if I can even get it to hook now, but we'll see. I mean, I'm going to a completely different track with a different surface, and I haven't made a pass down it, and it's probably going to take 2 or 3 passes just to get the thing somewhat ironed out.
I don't know, man. I think what's going to happen is you're going to okay. Suspension wise, I think you're already there. I think what it's
Yeah,
going to be is just getting the fuel map and the timing curve, or maybe actually just the fuel map, because timing is what it is. Timing is just the cylinder head knows what it wants for timing.
yeah. I didn't even have to change that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Tall Garage is saying that I'm actually showing the progress. The other guys just showed up with it done. Can't learn anything from that, right? Exactly. That's the whole
yeah,
idea.
they were just trying to beat you to the punch and steal your glory there, Ken. That's all that was
Yeah,
going on.
yeah, exactly. So, but other than that, I did get something for. It finally took this long from the No Name Nationals to get. I have a master cylinder now, and with the adapter that will work, so that way I can put a master cylinder on this weekend and maybe bleed some brakes. And if that's the case, I'm hopefully going to try to get it to the track before it gets cold, and at least get some shakedown runs on it. At least do a 150 and a 250 kit on it and see where it goes.
Hmm, that'd be interesting.
Yes.
Should be 550s or so, huh?
Well, with the 150 kit, I don't think so because remember, I'm killing a little bit so that way I can spray it a lot. Killing it a little bit is putting a glide in it and a 411 gear, and so I'll be leaving on like a 1.8, and the converter's really made for a 250 to 350 kit. Let's call it 950 to 1,000 foot-pounds of torque is really what the converter is designed for. With my weight of car, that gear and everything, and without without having any of that the first time down the track, it's going to be kind of a pig because the
Oh,
converter is going to be
sure.
a lot
Yeah,
tight.
the combo's all jacked up.
Yeah, so it's a lot tight. So if I feel if I can get a 650, 640 out of it with the setup it is right now with the glide, um, then yeah. Um, I just know that with my 3-speed, that car was awesome. Just out of the hole. It would just, like yours, it would just carry the front end. It was awesome. I
Yeah,
loved it. It was a lot of fun.
well, it was a lot of fun when it was carrying it was doing the big wheelies. Remember, like I had
Yeah.
that huge fan following out there, Barona. Like, God, I love that car. It leaves so hard.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, hey, well, look at the oil pan and the headers and the cross member and all that stuff. Like, yeah, they're all scraped, right?
That's
And
right.
and the guy's like, oh, what are you gonna do about it? I'm gonna tie the front end down so it doesn't do those crazy wheelies anymore.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm doing on mine. Is I'm not tying it down. I just, where the bump stops are, I just raise them up so that way the droop is only so much. So that way I can put it comes up as soon as it starts to transfer, it's going to drop out.
Yeah. Well,
So
your car, you don't even need to tie down with a 2-speed in it now. It'll
well,
probably be a lot more mundane than what you think.
yes, no, you're right. In fact, my progressive on it's right now it's set for a second and a half. I'm sorry, 2 seconds right now. So it comes on at now, even though 50%, or I'm sorry, 20%, that's really 50% of the fuel. We've done some flowing on the solenoids. So when you put it at 20%, we're cycling on and off
Uh-huh.
because fuel has weight and you're opening it and closing it, and it's under high pressure and so on and so forth. It really comes out to about 50%. So I'm going to be leaving at 50% power through the actual nitrous system. But it's going to be killing a lot of timing. So I'm going to be killing more timing than I really need. So that way it kind of helps it out of the hole. And then it's going to ramp in at about 2 seconds out, I think is where I have it right now.
Okay. Well, that puts you just past the 60-foot mark.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's,
That's where you want it all coming in. Because
yeah,
I
exactly.
actually used to do it with, well, this was back old school, right? Before you had progressive systems and all that. I had 2 kits on the car,
Hmm.
right? So I had one that was automatically done as soon as you matted it, right?
Yeah.
It came on, right? It was already armed. I actually did it with the T-Bird, the Thunderbird Turbo Coupes. If you look at the front of my car, it has the Turbo Coupe front bumper and valence and all that. Had fog lights up front, and I used those fog lights to run a relay, and that would arm the nitrous system. And then, as soon as you matted it with that small micro switch,
Yeah.
it would make that connection for the relay, and done, right? The second kit was as soon as the first one had already been armed and come on, you then just spray it with a button, and all you did was you let the car leave. You see the 60-foot go right by the passenger side window, and just hold the spray and pray, as they call it. Just let it go. I mean, there was nothing more sophisticated than that.
Hey, I'm listening to you here, but Talk Garage is asking a question here, and just what's the bolt pattern of a 300? Is that the same as like
It's,
a
it's,
Windsor?
it's the same as small block Ford, yeah.
Oh, it is so same as small
Yeah.
block Ford. Okay.
Man, I'm telling you right now, if you're going to do the 300 with the LS head, you're not doing a turbo or anything, are you?
I don't think so. I think it's just gonna
I'm
be.
thinking an AR5 because it's cheap. A 4080 if I had FU money. Okay. Um, I'm trying to think of what he should probably run. I know. I got this solved.
Okay.
Okay. The later Mustangs, I would say T5 and let it eat, right? But I know that thing's got gobs of torque. And,
What kind of torque are we talking here? What are the
well, it's
ones that
300 cube Ford. And normally they're
Yeah.
like 300 foot-pounds of torque, right?
Oh, okay.
280 foot-pounds of torque, but it's got an LS head on it, so it's going to breathe a lot better. And I would say it's probably going to make 350 foot-pounds of torque, but it'll probably be at a much higher RPM, right? But it's probably still making 300 foot-pounds of torque where it was at before, because that's what's good about the LS head. It has those big, tall ports that keeps the velocity high, but then it just keeps flowing even more.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm thinking. Find a later model, what they used to call the SN95 body style Mustangs, right?
Hmm.
And they had it was like I can't remember what it was. 3550? Was it a Tremec 3550 or a TKO 3550?
Yep.
I think that's what they were. And they're
TKO.
heavier. Yeah, they're heavier duty than the T5.
Hmm.
But they're also kind of a dime a dozen, and they come in every small block Ford application, even 302, I believe, because the first 2 years of the SN95 body style was a 302 car.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what Dan's saying right here. Is he's saying put a T5 behind it. he's saying if it's it's 157 tooth flywheel, it will bolt to a 300 and allow to run the Fox bell housing and a T5.
I just think that T5 would get lunched. I think the torque on it, because the torque is of a 300 is comparable to a 302 Ford, right?
Okay, gotcha.
But he's got an LS head on it, and the reason why I was saying that is if you're going to go, guys are going to want money for a T5. You show up and get the junkyard get the junkyard TKX or whatever the heck that was, TKO 5-speed out of like a SN95. No one's going to even care.
Yeah. Okay, he's saying, Dan's saying,
he wants to know if that is correct. I believe it uses the same flywheel and same bell housing bolt pattern as a regular 302 Windsor or 351 Windsor.
Yeah. See, I don't know much about the straight six Fords. I really don't. I don't.
Yeah, see, and it's just it's gonna eat that T5 a lot. That's what I'm thinking. I would go with like the TKO that came in the later Mustangs.
Yeah.
And then Andy saying they had an E4OD with Cope's valve body would live behind that motor forever. Yeah, because the E4OD is like a C6 with an overdrive. It would be extreme overkill for that 300 motor.
You would never have to worry about it, but you would kill a lot of power doing that.
There's a couple of options. Like you can, if you're looking at putting in a truck, okay, the Mazda transmission that came in the half-ton trucks will handle some abuse, but nothing like a ZF5 speed in a 3/4 ton truck. The only problem is the ZF5 is like, it's way overbuilt, and I'm assuming it's probably not got a gear pattern ratio that you're going to be happy with because it's a granny low first.
Here, Dan saying the 300 uses a small look forward bell pattern and the same crank to flywheel bolt pattern. Okay, well, good to know. Okay, well then that means that
in the Fox body. Yeah, try one of them TKOs. If it's going in a Fox body, try one of those TKOs. That's exactly what I would do. Out of like a 94. See, the SN95 body style, everyone thinks it was a revamped body, is technically just a rebodied Cougar and T-Bird. It has the same wheelbase, the same track width, all of it.
Yeah.
And when they got rid of the T-Bird and Cougar body style in '88, they started working. It's essentially, that's what the SN95 body style is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Need Metal's asking, is that car as clean as it looks in the video? Which car?
He's probably talking about the one that I'm working on.
Oh, yours?
Could be. I don't know. I don't know. But if it's yes, it is. It is actually cleaner than it looks in the video. Believe it or not. Yeah, the video doesn't do it any justice on how bitchin' that car is. If that's the one you're talking about, the '64 Dart. Yeah, right now like I said, he lives in Texas. But all of the suspension's worn out. The ball joints all that are good, but I think what he needs is if you can get some leaf springs and some torsion bars. I told him that I was talking to him last week a lot, and I told him, I was like, if I finish this thing, I want you to drive it home. I mean, how cool would that be for like he flies out here, one-way ticket, gets in the car and drives it back to Texas? Shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. I would definitely think that I would definitely think that the TKO that comes in the later Mustangs is probably going to be the better option. A T5, I'd like to see that because it would be a simple swap into that Fox body, but I think you're going to end up puking that T5 like just a couple of clutch dumps and it's going to be done. I would definitely stick with the TKO. And I'm sure there's so many aftermarket parts for the Fox that you could literally probably piece something together out of junk.
Yeah. So D150 is asking, do you guys have any problems with the Autometer electric oil pressure gauges? I'm telling you right now, I don't. I have one in my Dart right now, my green, the Lizard King. That's what I used to put the gauge inside my dash. Is I used one of those Autometer electric oil pressure gauges, and then I just have it lined into the side of my block, and it's been in there for 2 years, and it works just fine. And I've driven that thing for 24 hours straight at 80 miles an hour. So I personally have no problem with them.
Yeah. Well, to answer that question, that's what I have in my race car, and I love them. I do. I have an electric. I didn't want any. You know how you get the BS with the mechanical gauge with the oil line coming in the car and
Yep.
this and that. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna eliminate the whole thing. So I bought the super expensive gauge, but it works every time.
Yep.
What does he say in Anchorman? 60% of the time, every time. Right. So
Right.
yeah.
In
But
my race
that's
car,
what I use. I like those gauges, but man, they are pricey.
yeah.
Autometer's good stuff.
Yeah, I have a mechanical one in my car, and it's a stainless steel braided line that comes off the back of the block. So, because I've had that issue. In fact, when me and the wife were first starting, we were first together, we had a truck and it had one of those plastic lines that went into the back of the small block, and we were down in Mission Valley area, and this time when we were living in Poway. So the distance of like say 30 or 40 miles away, and that thing started leaking. It was just pumping oil inside the car, and then so I had to break the hose off the back, and then I just pinched it, and then Lisa had, and where I broke it off at it, she couldn't sit in the seat. She had to literally lay down on the bench seat with her hand underneath the dash and pinch that line off, so that way it didn't piss oil everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm not a big fan of those things. I'd like to just keep them outside the car, and that's what that electric gauge allows you to do. You don't have to worry about none of it.
yeah,
So Danny Boyd's saying that you just need a zero imbalance 157 tooth flywheel for a 300. Okay, let me tell you a trick behind this. If you have an externally balanced flywheel,
take it off.
you take the weight off, right?
That's right, just
Or you
take it
take
off.
it to the machine shop and you have it milled off,
Yeah,
right?
or
And then
yeah,
they'll
just cut
balance
the
it.
welds.
Yeah, they'll balance it to zero.
Yeah,
But generally, if you just take the weight off and then smooth it out where it was at, you're going to be
fine.
pretty dang close.
yeah, absolutely. That's actually what we did with a Ford once in San Diego. Is I just took a die grinder and cut that where the welds were, took it off, ground it down, and was like, okay, it's good.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah,
painted
they're
it
not
to
hard at
zero.
all. When you get externally balanced stuff, it's actually pretty simple because what they do is they put a weight on the flywheel or flex plate or whatever you're using at the exact spot where it needs to be balanced. And it's generally just machine that it's not machined into it. It's just welded on, just like Shane's saying.
Yeah. Um, but Tall Garage, before you buy anything, just wait. Please just wait a little bit. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm saying. Just wait a little bit. Don't buy anything yet. So, all right. Let's see. Anything else?
Well,
No,
and
no.
hey, if you don't buy anything, I do have a brand new set of clutch to flywheel bolts for a 5-liter setup, and I'm sure it'd be the exact same as the 300.
Yeah,
And so if you need them, just let me know, Ken, and I'll mail them to you.
that's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. Oh man, today's one of those days I've been thrashing to get to SEMA and PRI, and I've been looking at a screen for the last 3 days straight for 8 hours, 8.5
You're
hours.
pie-eyed, huh?
Dude, yeah, I'm a little tired, man. I get up and I walk around the building a couple times, but man, it's getting a little much right now. But it just is what it is. That's part of the job, though. You know, it is just
Yeah. Well, it's just this time of year, because then the rest of the year it's a piece of cake, right?
yeah. Well, it's still hard work, but as far as mentally, but it's not nearly the deadline factor. You know, it's not there.
I know. Man, if he's going manual transmission, he's going to stick it in Fox. I tell you what would be cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. Forego all that pain in the butt stuff to install, modify, change, whatever, right? Put a freaking, like a top loader 4-speed in that sucker.
oh yeah. I think he wants to drive it though. I think the point of this is that's why he wants the overdrive.
Oh, he didn't say he wanted overdrive. He just said what transmission. I put a top loader in it, dude. That's a
Well, that'd
one
be easy.
beefy. That'd be one beefy transmission that it will bolt right up to that flywheel or that flex plate. Or oh my God, where's my brain? It will bolt right up to that bell housing, and it'll work with that clutch assembly because it's got the same splines, right? And then you just put a hydraulic throw-up bearing on that thing, and then plumb it into your Fox stuff. And I'm certain they got hydraulic throw-out assemblies for a Fox,
Yeah.
But
Yeah, today in Hardcore Tech, we're actually going to have one of our viewers here, Jeff from Two Hacks, is asking me some questions about a carbureted LS, and I'll read it to you guys, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, that's going to be full John Wilburn here. This
Man,
is all
you
the
had
stuff.
me freaking out. I thought we were literally an hour in already. I was like, what?
No,
Gosh.
no, but it's already been 45 minutes or 40 minutes. That's
I
moving
know it
along
does go
today.
by fast.
Yeah, you get going on your cars and stuff, and but I've been driving the Green Dart for the past week and a half now. Man,
Uh-huh.
I miss driving that car. I just miss it. That's you get in a car that you're familiar with. It just feels like home. Even though, and the heater works in it just awesome. I got to tell you, man, it heats up so fast that by the end of the street, I'm already getting some heat on it. My diesel truck takes literally. I'm at work and the heater starts working.
It probably doesn't have much of a cooling system in it. Most of it is contained within the block itself. So
Right.
I know what you mean. My Suburban is kind of like my second home, and unfortunately, like I really need to spend some money on it. The carpeting is so ragged.
Dude, just
it's
rhino line it. Like I had my truck. I rhino lined the inside and outside of that truck. I loved it.
it's a Suburban.
Doesn't matter. You can rhino line it and just put some cheap
It's
ass
a
carpet.
Buick Suburban. All right, it's got to have carpet. But I don't know. I'll probably do something with it. I need to patch some rust holes in it. I've got to fix a few things. I want to put the EFI system on it.
So Damien's asking a question. This is actually a legitimate question. Would it be important to degree the camera Briggs & Stratton 300 horsepower engine, or just send it? Here's the thing: is that most of those you can't even really change to begin with. So
They're
I would
geared.
just,
They're
and it's
geared.
300. It's 3 horse, and let's put in percentages. If you're going to gain 10%, let's just make it outrageous number. Now you're making 3.3 horsepower. I would just leave it alone. I would just say, put it together, line up the dots, and send it. But unless it's a performance cam, then that's a whole different deal. But I don't even think you can adjust those.
Not for a
There's a
3-horse.
company that's got to make one.
I doubt anybody makes a camshaft for a 3-horse Briggs because I don't care if it's horizontal or vertical shaft.
Mm-hmm.
They were never used in any performance racing application whatsoever.
No, yeah, I'd say just send it.
Yeah, line up the dots. Stop wasting your time. Put some RTV on that case shell and close her up.
Right.
Yeah.
And let her
And
eat.
don't forget your oil slinger.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Right. I've done that.
me too. Because I'm like, you get to the end, you're like, oh no.
What's this little scoop? Where does this go? Oh, that's right. I got to take everything back apart and put it on the rod bolts. That sucks. Yeah.
Fab Race Mod Repeats in here for the second week in a row. He was probably looking for us when I was laying low at the beginning of the year when we took all this off the AHRA channel and put it over here. But
Yeah. Anybody got any questions out today?
yeah, we need some questions. If you don't have any questions, go over and see what they're not answering on UTG's Wednesday night Tech Talk Live, and we'll answer it
Yeah.
because we have legit answers.
Here, I bought some flaky chrome Krager S's. Not sure how to refinish them. Can't be rechromed without being cut up and welded. I can't be powder coated without stripping chrome. Recommendations.
Oh, dude, this is easy.
Okay.
And here's how I would do it. Okay, because I like junk stuff like this where you try to make them look nice,
Yep.
and you're like, what do I got
Here
to
you
lose?
go.
It already looks like a bag of crap. So
Yep.
what do I got to lose? All right, so this one's simple to me. It's simple, and hopefully I can explain it well. I would get in there with some, let's say, I don't know, maybe 600 grit sandpaper, 400 grit sandpaper, and I would smooth down where all the chrome is starting to peel,
Yep.
right? And then I would go in there with epoxy, and I would fill in any divots, cracks, crevices, all that stuff, and I would smooth it out, and I would put high build primer on it, and then I would sand that down by hand, and I would hit it with some gold paint, dude.
Right.
That's
I was going to say
exactly how I
black.
would you? Were you?
That's funny you said that because that's exactly what I was going to say. But I was going to go with like a DE 1634, which is like a low gloss black.
Uh-huh.
That's what I was going to do. But yeah, that's exactly what I've done. I was going to sand them down, or even if you want to make them even look crazier, sand them down and then where it's at, then clear coat it so it just looks like that, like an old ragged out rim.
Well, originally way back when the Krager SS was new, they had another option. Krager, it wasn't an SS wheel, it wasn't fully chromed. It had a like a magnesium looking center, and you could shoot that thing with some magnesium looking paint, and then put like a dual clear on it, and it would probably look pretty damn bitchin'.
Yeah. Now, there's a question here that I don't know the answer to this one. On my 85 GLH turbo, we'll be doing the clutch soon. FSM, who's that?
I don't know.
Says, do not flat machine the flywheel surface. The surface profile is tapered. Can you guys give me some insight on that one? I don't know, but I've done a few of these things because those were like really the hot.
No, you can't have a tapered. You cannot have a.
It's got to be
tapered face.
flat.
It has to be flat.
Yeah, it can't be tapered. I don't know, man. That it would just.
I can't see that even being a possibility.
Yeah.
Where it's tapered, because if it's tapered, the clutch face is not tapered. That's something weird.
That is something weird. I've never heard of that one. 'Cause I'm very familiar with the Omnis, and I've never heard of that before.
Well, I can't see what would be the purpose of tapering it. Does it give you more surface area? No, not in that case. It wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at a few of these online right now, and I don't see any taper on them. They look flat.
Man, I would have to get the new clutch and look at it and check it out with like a machinist rule that you bring it up now, but I'm almost certain that's going to be a flat surface. I have never heard. If it was tapered, it would be the only car on the planet that's tapered. I would assume. Right. I mean, because even new stuff now is flat. I mean, I can't see. Generally, there's a purpose for something like that, right?
Yeah.
And if it's tapered, I was trying to think, would it give you any more surface area? And it would be an angle. It would be slightly more surface area, but it's so much simpler to just put a like I say, a half-inch bigger flywheel on it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't know, man. On that one, I really don't know on that one, but I can tell you right now, I don't see how it would be tapered, because then each time you're increasing pressure to want to slip, it just doesn't make sense. And then the tapers would have to be perfect. Flat is easier, because whenever you put pressure on flat, it stays flat. It's not trying to push it anywhere. So, I don't know. Let's see here. Someone is saying, I wonder if that's because the clutch disc tends to deflect profile under higher RPMs, so they machine the flywheel to accommodate it. I don't know, man. I think it's flat. I do. All right. Oh, yes. Yeah. Get to me with the plenum size volume. That's actually good. Yes. Well, we can definitely talk about that a lot. Oh, here Cove is saying this is exactly right. 88, 2.2 5-speed, and it was flat. So there you go. Yeah,
right.
It's flat.
But Danny Boy said, is the taper there but not present on the friction surface? No, it can't be. Both of them would have to be tapered at the same angle, right? Because otherwise you're going to have just ride in one spot. That's where I was thinking about this can't work like that.
No. And there would be really that's I don't think that's a possibility. I don't. That's just my opinion. I could be 100% wrong, but I really think that on that one.
Yeah, I would definitely, if I was you, to be very careful about it, I would buy myself the new clutch, and I would put a machinist rule across the face of that clutch to see if there is any taper to it.
Yeah.
Because it would have to be tapered at the same angle as that flywheel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with that one. And I just looked it up I looked up a clutch on O'Reilly's, and there's nothing on there that shows anything about being tapered. So I'm going to say it's good.
Okay. Well, Schweers and Gears down there says that thanks for the tips, guys. Another one for you. Local transmission shop says he can make my 700 R4 live at 600 horsepower for $2,700. My D-stroke 400 should make around 450-ish when done.
That's good.
Do it or pass. That's a pretty... Okay, Shane's built a 204R, and it was probably in the realm of that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, the 700R4, there's a lot more parts available for it because you can rob virtually all the good stuff out of like a 4L70E or 4L75E, and they literally bolt right in because it's virtually just an updated version of that transmission. Okay, so
$2,700 is a lot of money, though.
it is. Okay, I'll tell you how I ended up getting into transmissions. And I was living in Hawaii. I was stationed in the Navy in Hawaii, and I had a '87 Monte Carlo Super Sport. I was trying to get back on the road, and I had taken the 204R out, threw it in the back of my truck, drove it down to the local transmission shop, thinking I'm looking at, what's the worst thing they're going to hit me with? $1,200? No. I got in there, it was just like you, $2,500, right? And I asked the guy, like, US dollars? He's, yes, US dollars, bruh. And I'm like, that can't be right. That's awfully high. And so he took me back in the back where the transmission builder guy was at. And he says, hey, man, how much we do 204R for? And the guy looked at him and said, $2,500. And he had this smile. And he literally had one tooth right here, right? And it dawned on me at that point, this guy's the transmission builder, right? If he hasn't figured out oral hygiene and he's the transmission builder, I can do this,
Yes.
right? Because I got oral hygiene pretty much taken care of.
Yeah.
I can easily nail this transmission. So I got on a Buick Grand National forum and I asked, hey, what's the basic recipe for a 204R that'll handle 400 horse? And these guys gave me a list of parts that you need to buy. And it was virtually like a TCI transmission rebuild kit that came with good clutches and good steels. And then they told me to sandblast the steels, right? Which I did. Let's see, they told me which pistons to go order from GM, like the apply pistons, because you could still order for a Grand National. This was like 2004 or 5. So you could just go down to the parts store, or as long as you had the part number, you just go down and buy this stuff at General Motors, at the parts at the dealership. So I wouldn't be opposed to doing one yourself for that kind of price. And if somebody can give you a good list of parts that you need, somebody that's reputable, that you have faith in, go buy the stuff yourself. And then there's a book that you need to buy. Go on Amazon and get this book. It's ATSG, Automatic Transmission Supplier's Guide, How to Rebuild a 700R4, right? Or it may be called a 4L60 at that point or something. I don't know. But you need that book. And it's going to show you where every check ball goes, every bolt, every torque sequence, every spec, everything you need to know about that 700R4. And it's also going to tell you you're going to need like 27 different specialty tools to rebuild this thing. No, you don't. You don't. A lot of it's just flat-bladed screwdrivers and paying attention to know-how.
Yeah, and a lot of those transmissions from that time are like that. They're, screwdriver, a few clips, a few things, and they come apart pretty easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I after he was doing that, I was just kind of just checking out like what was a 600 horsepower 700R4 cost. I would have to pass. I'm with John Wilburn on this one. $2,700 is a lot. I would look up some videos. Just watch a few. I would watch some videos on how to build it. I would say give it a shot. What are you out if you build it and you hurt something, right?
Right. Well, if it doesn't work, guess what? You're only out a couple $100 in hard parts, if that. You could rebuild 3 of them transmissions for that kind of price.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, Colleen sent me a picture here, and it's we're gonna go full John Wilburn here.
Oh, she's clothed, right?
Yeah. I'm assuming it's a spring compressor checker for like valve springs.
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming, so that way you put your torque wrench in there, and you can check it. That's what I'm thinking it is. Am I correct?
Okay. Michael Schmidt saying aluminum valve spring retainers. Under what conditions can these be used and not self-destruct?
I would never use an aluminum valve spring retainer at all.
All of those are super duper hardened steel, and there's a reason for it. That spring is super duper hardened steel. Will chew right through that aluminum.
Yeah, because the springs actually rotate. The springs rotate as they're in different RPMs. So it would just basically gall it, knead it to death. I would just go with the titanium. Titanium would, if that's what you're looking for, but I definitely wouldn't use an aluminum one at all.
I just go see if there's an easier way around that. If you're trying to save the weight, get rid of the regular cylindrical spring and just go to a beehive spring.
Mm-hmm.
Shane and I did this, and it cut the retainer down to like half the size, which was equal to half the weight.
Yep.
Um,
And then you can
my
go with a lot lighter spring too, because
yeah,
then it's a smaller top, bigger at the bottom, so you got a different rate. It's a nicer
it's a
rate. It doesn't get
progressive
this,
spring, right?
yeah, and it doesn't get the coil stack on it, and it's a pretty good spring combination nowadays, and that way you don't have as much seat pressure. Yeah, Loud is saying, yeah, he goes, all the aluminum retainers cracked on my Ford went to, yeah, that's exactly. I would just go straight to titanium. I'm leery of anything aluminum that's going to be heating up, cooling down, heating up, cooling down. Even rods, at that point, they're going to stretch and they're going to just have
Well,
weird
the
properties.
aluminum rods are worth it if you're running top fuel and you want to get the last 1 millionth of a second out of this thing,
Exactly.
right? Otherwise, for us poor schlubs, you just buy a good set of H beams or I beams, and you're going to be good for quite a while.
Yeah, and then this is always an ambiguous thing. What are the best rods ever? What I could put in my car, and you're like, what are you doing? Because aluminum would be the best if it's just an RPM. You start it up, you do a burnout, you go down the track, you shut it off. Aluminum. If it's something that you're looking to, make a lot of power with, and you don't have a ton of money, I would just go with the steel rod, a good one.
Yeah.
Call
The
it
rule
good.
of thumb used to be if you're going to spend money, you spend money on the cylinder head,
That's right. Build everything
right?
around it.
And you have just enough bottom end to handle that cylinder head. That's it. That's all you need. And if you blow it up, guess what? You don't have a big pile of money in it, and generally the cylinder heads don't get damaged when you blow them up.
And if you're going to buy a cylinder head, don't look at max CFM. Look at the 300 and the 400 numbers and the 500 numbers. That's where you're going to get the massive. That's where the velocity is going to get. So if you can find, like, if one flows 320, but the other one flows only 300, but it's close to 300 by 300 lift, that's the one I would be getting.
Danny Boyd said, "Don't go jake breaking on those aluminum rods."
Right. Yeah, exactly. So basically, multiply abrasive effect against the aluminum retainer. Yeah, anytime you have any type of step or whatever, like a two-step, it's going to just annihilate those things, just eat them up. And also, too, RPM would kill them because the spring's going to be going one way, and then when it hits a
Well,
noise
and
like
it's going to
harmonic,
it's just like he's saying, it's going to be shaking like this, so it'll
yeah,
be abrasively chewing that aluminum to death.
yeah. Heaven Mopars Wilburn, we were talking about rebuilding Trans 727. Never done one before. Recommendations on where to get a rebuild kit, cope, have them. Anything I should know or do. Well, what kind of power are you going to make? That's really what it comes down to. Because a 727, I've literally done stock rebuild, which is better clutches, and a revalve kit, like one of those Trans Go kits, or anything that you can just find.
Well, there's a
And
banner directly behind Shane's head. That I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a smart, but I am actually coming across as that. But that's what I did for my 204R. I called it, had all the stuff in it, the gaskets, the seals, every piece I needed. It was like a no-brainer. But I have scored Turbo 400 stuff, a whole entire kit just like that. It's vacuum sealed in a plastic bag, and for Turbo 400 on Amazon.
yeah,
And they're usually like $230, something like that.
yeah, and that's 727 is really good up to that. And then also too, it comes down to what weight vehicle you're running. If you're running it like, say, in an A body, and you have, like, say, 600 horsepower, you're really not going to have an issue. In fact, in my Dart, it was running like, I never got into the nines with the 727, but it was running low tens with the 727, and literally it was just a rebuild kit with extra clutches and a valve body that had a trans brake in. Oh, and I had a bolt-in sprag in it. That's what I did have. Other than that, you can just rebuild them.
Yeah.
Dakota's,
Well, the thing I was going to throw out there, I mean, John Cope's in our community. I mean,
yeah,
why not throw some cash to Cope if you're going to buy something, right? I would definitely go to John Cope, or yeah, go to Cope,
personally,
Mason
I would go to
Transmission.
TCI because but I do use some of Cope's stuff too because yeah, it's good stuff too. Dakota's timeout's asking, my
He didn't
four.
ask anything. He said his
Oh,
455 has Eagle rods now.
I thought that was a question at the
No,
end. Yeah.
that's because your Pontiac 455 has got tons of stroke, man.
That's right. That's what I was going to say. There's only the reason why is because it's the stroke. That's why. And they were designed for that. And plus, Pontiacs aren't really good for high RPM. Right, kind of like a Buick. You got to do a lot of oiling mods on them to make them live and higher RPMs.
They actually have the same main bearing affliction. It's the same diameter main journal, right? So 3.25. Oldsmobile's 3.5.
Wow.
Right, and then then you look at the Oldsmobile and you're like, what in the world? 3.5-inch main bearing,
Yeah.
or a main journal. And here's the sad part: is the heads on a Oldsmobile are like a Cleveland. They got those big, massive tunnel style ports, right?
All right. So we're at 8 o'clock. We're going to do our hardcore tech here.
Oh, it's that time
So, yeah.
again.
This was brought to us by Jeff at Two Hacks Garage. He's got a friend who's building a carbureted LS bottom end with the cam. Heads are factory, but with a valve job. He'll run the cast iron header style manifolds. What carb would you recommend? And the cam that he's picking out is a 212 218 on a 112 LSA. RPM range is right around 1200 to 5800, 6000, give it. After that, it's going to start falling off, but there'll be plenty of over rev on it. And they're claiming at the camshafts, they're claiming 52 horsepower and 23 foot-pounds of stock, torque over stock. Here's what I would do, man. Anything that's a 650, we have that brand new VRS carburetor out, 650. We have the AVS 650, but anything with the, 600. I would try to get a 650 because anything that I've built for the street, even in my little engine recipes that I build, it's a 650 carb because it's a really good high velocity carburetor that you can drive around on the street, and you're not going to be RPMing this thing much over 6,000 anyways.
It's going to get good signal because of that. Yeah, because it's
Exactly.
smaller. Does it say in there how big is this LS motor he's talking about?
It doesn't say at all. But here's also too, I was actually looking, I forgot the LSA, but it was on a 112 LSA, and I know I already said that, but I forgot it in my brain.
It's a very stock style camshaft.
Yeah, it's a very stock, but it's a much tighter LSA, and as far as the cam specs, but a 650 would be awesome on this, and because of the 112, it's going to have a really decently smooth-ish idle. It's not really going to have much sound off the exhaust, so that thing's going to run bitching because it's going to have good signal, and the second you hit that thing, it's gonna go like a scalded dog right off the bat. So I would do a 650. So I'm going to.
I think with that profile.
Huh?
I if you're going carbureted, I think with that profile, man, you know what? I'd run a Q-Jet on that sucker.
The manifold that he's running is a
4150.
Yeah, it's a 4150. It's like this style right here. Here's the manifold.
Okay, like yeah, you buy from
Yeah,
LeBron.
that's
okay.
why. Yeah.
Yeah. So that 650, or maybe even if you wanted to get a little bit hairy, if you can find a 750. See, the good thing, like if you stick to a vacuum secondary carburetor, even if you got like a 911 50 47 CFM carburetor, it's only going to use as much as when that air door comes open and equals 0.
Yeah.
All right. So if it needs only 27 CFM, it's going to only open up far enough to deliver 27 CFM. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's why I like vacuum secondary carburetors. But Shane's right, that VRS, it has 4 tunable circuits in it, right?
Right.
Like, so you look at a Holly only has like what, 2 tunable circuits?
2 tunable circuits. Yeah. Idle and wide open.
The Quadrajet was kind of an oddity because it technically has 3, but 4 tunable circuits, you can't go wrong. I mean, that's the most you can tune each individual circuit itself.
Yeah. So, and Jason's garage thing, he had a 650 Edelbrock on his 5.3 with stock computer ignition, running the ignition. Yeah, that's the way I would go. That's almost perfect. Heavens Mopar, probably nothing higher than 500 horse, 383, 440 with charger. Okay, then just do a rebuild on it. That's what I would do, is just do a rebuild. I would put a bolt-in sprag in the back just because I've seen them blow up. It's just a prevention thing. I would get the thinner clutches so you can add some extra clutches here and there, and then go from there. When you take it apart, you'll see what Sun gear you have. If you got a 3 or 4 or 5, I would try to find something that you can, at least a 4. I know that Cope sells them, with different pins on them. I think they got 4 or 5 for those. So that's what I would do.
Dude, you could. He's talking about this is a 383 or 440 with about 500 horse, right?
Yeah, basically a
You
rebuild.
got a stock rebuilt 727 is going to do that sucker.
Yeah, the only reason I was saying the extra clutches is just because it's
It'll last longer.
Last longer, exactly. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why I'm just a stock rebuild. But the stuff that the factory messed up from the beginning, that's the only stuff I would change.
Yeah. So transmissions, that's a very big. I don't know. Wives' tale amongst our community, hot rod community, right? Is where people think that they got to beef the tranny up when they go, a couple hundred horsepower more. And you don't always have to do that. It's not always the case. And I'll give you an example. I was crewing on a guy's dragster when I was stationed in Australia. He had a front engine dragster, had a small block Chevrolet in it. We built the motor in his garage or in his little storage building. It was a 406 cubic inch, and we said, man, or he says, we're adding about 200 horse to this motor, and we're going to overdrive this blower. It was like I want to say it was an 871 high helix blower, right?
Yeah.
So that means it was really meant for pumping some serious air. And then we overdrive it by like 20%. So if let's say it's doing 1,000 RPM, it's doing 1,200 RPM on the blower, right? It's a significant amount of overdrive.
Yeah.
And so we're like, all right, well, we'll pull it had power glide in it. We had a short tail housing power glide, and we pulled that out and we took it to the tranny shop. And the guy called him in about 2 hours later, like, man, you got to come see this. Come down here and look. And we got down there, and it was literally stock GM clutches and steels in this rail that was making let's say it makes 3,000, 3,500 horsepower, right?
Weight.
But the car weighed 1,100 pounds,
Yeah.
right? And so it was absolutely bone stock stuff from 1962 in this glide. And we're like, well, I guess just go through it and change it. He's like, what do you want to change it with? Just put it in something that's equivalent. I mean, it was happy the way it was.
Yeah.
Right? But
and Dakota's timeout's actually kind of chiming on this. He goes, he had a 750 vacuum secondary, didn't really open up until about 4,500 RPMs, and that was with the yellow spring. And that's the reason why I was just saying go with a smaller carb, because that way you'll have velocity through it all the time. And then D150 is actually asking a really good question. At what point do I need a separate fuel pump to supply my N2O? Here's the thing, is that depending on what your fuel system is to begin with. Now, on my car, I'm running an Aeromotive A1000 style pump. And so it's a -10 feeding it. And so I'm essentially daisy chaining 2 regulators. So it comes in and it's a full bypass. And then it's got a -8 that goes back. So it really comes down to, we've talked about this before. If you have something that has high velocity, so you're going to have a super ton of high velocity going to those 2 regulators. And then depending on your fuel system, which I'm assuming you're going to have a return system, that's the only way you're really going to be able to make this work. When you hit the nitrous, you're going to be basically injecting whatever the nitrous is from that regulator. Let's say about 7 pounds, 6 pounds is what they normally have through an 073 jet. And you're going to have a much higher velocity of fuel going through those regulators. And which means that when you have higher velocity, what's going to happen? Pressure is going to drop. So you're going to get a little bit more fluctuation in fuel, because even though you flow it when the car is running and so on and so forth, you're going to have, when that thing comes on, it's going to have a significantly drop on it. So if you're running at the ragged edge, let's say your engine makes 500 horse and you're running a 250 kit to it, or even a 200, you're going to be literally at the max of what that thing can actually flow as far as fuel goes, as far as gallons per minute. It just won't keep up. And whenever, like I said before, high velocity, low pressure. So you're gonna drop on there. So it really comes down to your setup, how your fuel system's set up, and whatnot, and if you have a bypass. So there's really no way to answer that truthfully, but as far as telling you exactly what you need, but I can tell you just whatever your system is right now, how much you're going to flow beyond that, and looking to grow into it. Most people will just buy a Holley blue pump and then deadhead the system, which works fine too. But just make sure that you flow it correctly, because the deadhead system is going to have a little bit of you're going to have a little bit of air in the line. So a lot of people will do a return. So you'll have two little, bungs on it. So that way you can put just a little tiny valve in that to run it back. But yeah, that's really my 2 cents on it. What
The
about you?
smartest cheap one that I've ever seen is where guys run the Holley blue pump to run the motor.
Yep.
Right. And then you use the mechanical factory pump for your nitrous system.
Really?
Yeah, because the motor's running and it's always going to have fuel. It's never going to starve it for fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I've never seen that one before.
Where you use a mechanical fuel pump to run the nitrous system?
No, I've seen it the other way. I've seen it where they
the mechanical pump to run the motor?
Run the engine, yeah, and then they run the Holley blue pump to run the nitrous.
There isn't a mechanical pump out there. Well, okay, and just to explain, I guess so. There isn't a mechanical pump out there that you're going to put on your motor that's probably going to do 500 horse. Okay, a 500 horsepower motor. Most of those mechanical pumps from the factory were about the cap out them. If you look at, there's some of the big block Chevrolet ones with that big volume pump assembly. They'll do like 450 horse, right?
Yeah,
from the factory, and those are the ones that you would scavenge, because as simple as those pumps are, you can change the arm on them pretty easy. It's literally just pressed in there with a little rod through the center, right? And you can change those arms, and you can get a Buick one and take the arm off and put a Chevrolet arm on it, or whatever you want, right?
Yeah, right.
They're not all that complicated. But guys would get like those 450 horsepower pumps to run the nitrous system, and then it's just drill your jets to suit. Is what you would start with, whatever the jetting is from the factory recommendation for, like, say, okay, I'll back it up a little bit. The electric pump was to run the motor, right? Because you needed something, generally, if you're 500 horse, you need a pump better than a factory mechanical pump. But that mechanical pump doesn't really rob any power from the motor when it's running. It doesn't. It's so negligible, it doesn't even notice it, right? And especially if it's not under heavy load, like fuel pressure load. The nitrous system requires, on a carbureted nitrous system, only requires about 4 to 8 psi. Okay, and with the small volume that you're flowing through there, it's only flowing when you got the nitrous system on. And the spray bar in there is literally just spraying it in a little stream, just like a squirt gun. But what happens is it gets atomized with the nitrous oxide, because that's why you'll see the spray bar for the nitrous on top, and it's spraying down from the top, and on the bottom, it's spraying the fuel in its little piss streams, right? And that nitrous just atomizes it like mad, right?
And it's cold too, so that's, yeah.
And it doesn't need a lot of fuel volume for that nitrous kit up until about 250, 300 horse is when you start running into volume on nitrous oxide. But see, if you're only adding 250 horse, okay, think about it. A 250 horsepower engine application only required a 5/16 fuel line, right? So that's where you start to crest the mechanical pump stuff, like is around whatever engine horsepower it was capable of running. That's about how much nitrous oxide you could run through it. So the ticket used to be just go get those big pumps that would support like a LS6 Chevrolet Chevelle 454, and it'd do 450 horse, right? So you just take that pump, throw it out there, draw the line at 300, and then say, okay, if I got to go more than that. But what's cool is when you open the hood, people look at the mechanical pump and they immediately assume that you're running that to the carburetor.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so they think, oh, man, this guy doesn't know jack crap. He's going to get his doors freaking blown off.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was the cool part with them.
You know, that reminds me of a little story I'm going to tell, since we don't have anything coming through right now. But the very first day that Barona was open, when it went from a sand drag to a drag strip. I was up there, and the very second car to go down there was this Camaro, and it was one of these anniversary cars. It was red, and he had this nitrous system on it, and it was a dry system. And he's like, "Yeah, I just put this nitrous system on." And I told him, I was like, "Man, that's a dry system." I was like, unless you got injectors to help or they did a tune. He goes, "No, it's only a 100 horsepower kit. It's going to be fine." And he goes, and then I was like, "Well, you're introducing oxygen, so you got to have fuel to burn." And then he came back with one of these. So, and I've been doing this for, 20 plus years, and at that point I tuned out. I was just like, okay. And this is the true story. He went to go down this track. He was in the left-hand lane. I will never forget, because I was standing right there on the bleachers, right there in the corner. And as soon as he launched, it popped.
Oh yeah.
And when it popped, it hit the hood, and that car burned to the ground. Second, two cars to go down the track at Verona, and it literally burned to the ground, and it was on fire. And they picked it up with the tractor, took it off the track, and then dumped it over the rail. It was literally just past the 60-foot mark, and that car literally burned right there on the track. I'll never forget that.
It's just like, man, piston holes for sale.
Right?
Piston holes for sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
The dry systems, when they came out, was the cheapest thing. All it was a gimmick. I think it was a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
It was selling you half a nitrous system for 3/4 of a regular nitrous system price.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You had one less solenoid, one less fuel line, one less all of it. And guys were buying them up because they were cheaper than a regular nitrous system. Oh man,
By
I can get a nitrous system, like $400.
Yeah.
And then like a regular nitrous system would be like $550, $600, right? Man, I'm gonna go buy a dry system. And it's like, that was the ticket for a while. Guys were running the dry systems, and like Shane was saying, it didn't say in the instructions, like, hey man, make sure you're gonna fuel system support this sucker.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember that too. The pop, and I remember Joey was standing right next to me. Well, that doesn't sound good, and we just watched that thing burn.
I popped one time. It was cold. The car was cold, and I was showing off, and I turned the nitrous system on, and man, it launched hard, and then pow, and the car died. Check engine light came on. I got out. It dented the hood from the underside. It actually backfired through the throttle body. The Ford Mustang has, in my T-Bird is the same way, but the Ford Mustang has the elbow that comes out and goes to the mass air meter.
Yeah.
It blew the entire top off that mass air meter, that plastic top, and dented the underside of my hood.
I've done bad things too. In fact, that's why I have a fiberglass hood on my cars, because I backfired and I put dents in it. Danny Boy's asking, what's the safe limit for a dry system? 25, 30 horsepower. Here's my take on this. I would never run a dry system.
No. I always run a wet system. You always have fuel. Always err on the side of fuel. Always.
Yeah. And there's really no answer to this. I mean, any system dry is safe if you can add extra fuel somehow. If it's a fuel injected car, you run more injector when you turn the nitrous system on, but you have to add more fuel unless your car is already so fat, like it's already way over carbureted.
Pig Rich would be your main name.
Yeah. There was a guy who ran a dry system in San Diego, and he was very successful with it, but it was a 350 Chevy, and he had a 750 carb on it, and literally had 8 jets bigger than what he needed in it. And that was the only way it really, and it was fast. It worked, but it was basically fouling plugs everywhere it went. It was like,
yeah, if it wasn't on the bottle, it was a turd.
Yeah, right. So, exactly. So, I don't have an answer for this, because I'm going to tell you right now, I personally would never run a dry system. If I was going to run a dry system, it would be on a fuel injected system, and I would definitely be adding more fuel somehow.
Yeah, well, I would, if I was to run a dry system, just like Shane was saying, there's advantage to a dry system. You don't have all that volume taken up by the fuel coming in the intake manifold.
Yep.
Right? Now, the way I would run it is if it was in an EFI application and the computer was running the fuel like instantaneous, right?
Yeah, change the map instantly.
Yeah, and that's the way I would do it.
Yeah. John saying actually something. Dry kit was a fad turn like no prep is now. Yeah, I remember that was all like dry kit. No, what
You run a
really
dry
need to
kit?
just
No, I wouldn't want to run one of those pieces of junk. Oh, dry kit's the greatest thing ever. But no, when you add fuel, like, look, dude, if my car is not going to have a problem with melting pistons out.
yeah. D150 saying, Shane, it's hard to find info on big block Mopars. Is there a beehive spring and small retainers? There are, but it's all going to be custom. I don't think anyone just actually has them. There might be a company, but I don't know of it. off the
No,
top of my
remember
head.
when we did mine? Okay, so none of them are like, because I did it for a Buick, and none of them said Buick valve retainer, right?
Yeah, we
what
can
you
make
need
it.
is what you need is the diameter of the spring that you're going to get. You need the retainer size for the diameter of the spring you're going to get, and then you need it has to have the retainer lock angle that you have on your engine, right?
Yeah. Or you could just go, if you want, a custom kit can be made. You can either send it to silentdailygarage@yahoo.com, or you can go spleto@edelbrock.com. If you tell me, there's a whole bunch of stuff I would need to know, like the installed height. Or if you don't have that, you can get a set of calipers and just pull the valve up, take all the cups and seats off, and then measure from that surface to the top of the groove or to the center of the groove of the valve, and we can kind of go from there and figure it out. And then we can kind of stack it. But you really need to pick your camshaft first, because a lot of beehives are going to have a lot less seat pressure, and they're going to be a lot higher over the nose for RPM, and then that's why they do that. So it's nicer on the rocker arms coming off of, like, say, opening the exhaust on blowdown. But yeah, just do some measurements on that, and I think I have a form. There's got to be a form somewhere where you can just
Well,
do some dimensions.
I remember when
figure
you
it
and I did this on mine, and what it was is I already had the camshaft,
out.
and I had
Yep.
springs, but the springs. Okay, well, the reason why I wanted to run it was the springs that I had were like a gargantuan triple valve spring monstrosities, right? And I'm
Yep.
like, man, I got to take two springs out of the inner spring so I can break this in. Then I got to put them all back in, right? I did not want to do that. And if you run one spring, you don't have to do that at all.
Yeah.
And so I called Shane, hey man, I'm trying to lose some weight out of the valve train. I got this going on, that going on. And he was like, oh, how big is the spring? And so that's where we started at. He was like, find a spring with the base diameter of this. It's got to have a retainer that you can get for 11/32 valve, right? And then we went from there. Now I could have went a little bit further. Like I could have got titanium retainers and all kinds of stuff.
But you wouldn't save them much, because the retainer was so small to
It's
begin with.
rinky dinky compared
Yeah,
to
and
the
it
one
was-
I took off of there.
Yeah, it was negligible, and it was so much lighter. Literally, I think it was half the weight of the retainer, wasn't it? Half the weight.
Well, after the whole thing, the thing I remember was after it was all said and done, between the chromoly valves or the chromoly adjustable push rod, the high ratio Buick rocker arms that I used that I made, and then the retainer and the spring weight, and then the keepers themselves, it was 30 grams per valve. Right, which was like you said, 500 to 700 more RPM just based off of that.
Yeah.
It would make the cam 500 to 700 RPM higher
Yeah,
revving.
and that's huge. And also, too, before you even start with the valve springs, the only reason why I knew what Dallas to set up is because I already had the cam specs, and I knew didn't we profile that camshaft? Wasn't that a camshaft
That was that was the Crowder clearance cam.
Yes,
it was
it was the
35
clearance cam.
bucks, right? So,
Yeah. So what I did is he gave me the number, and I was able to pull the masters, because you have to set up the spring for how fast the ramps are. You can't just arbitrarily say I need 120 on the seat and 250 over the nose or 350 over the nose. It really comes down to what rocker arm ratio you're running. All the spring, it all has to be tied together. So literally the springs are going to be kind of the last thing that you're going to want to do. But I always tell people to check out what is available, what can fit, because then that tells you what kind of camshaft you can really make as far as how fast you can get with masters. Also, too, you need to know what rocker arms you're going to run, because that's going to tell how much the valve velocity is going to see. That's actually as far as how fast the valve is going to open and close. Those are imperative to knowing what spring to run. It's just not anyone who just gives you a number like, hey, put it at 250 over the nose or 300. They obviously have never really set up a lot of cars because you need to know all the parameters. And I remember for a fact that when I was talking with Dallas on this, I remember saying, "Oh yeah, it was a clearance cam," and he gave me the number. I was able to archive it and then check the. Was that a custom one, or was that one that was over the
No,
counter?
it wasn't over the counter. It was a clearance camshaft, and it was a big solid flat tappet for Buick 350.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I said, man, there can't be many of these being sold. He said, that's why it's on clearance, right?
but what I mean by was it a shelf ground, like it was
It was a shelf
kind of,
grind. It was a Crowler
yeah,
shelf grind.
yeah. So that's what I remember in those, and most of the shelf grinds that Crowler did at that time, they were pretty safe as far as speed on the valves. Most shelf grinds. Now I'm going to use the word key most because there are some out there that are much faster, but they're really set up for the average guy to put in their car, so they don't really have to get super technical on install height, spring pressures, and getting it set up the valve so that way it's 50 thousandths before coil bind. Because I remember we did that too.
We had to
Dallas,
figure that one
set
out. Yeah, we had to figure that out.
Yeah, we had to find out where coil bind was, max lift, and then lash. You got to factor that in. But we set it all up so that way it was 50 thousandths for coil bind. And what that does is stabilizes the valve train so that way it doesn't go out of control. So there's a lot. So this can't be answered. There's a lot of questions. If you want help with that, I have no problem doing that. You can just send it to Slant Daily Garage or Yahoo and S Pulido, Pulido at edelbrock.com, and we'll get you hooked up.
So Michael Schmidt's asking, how would a dry kit best be used by an unpopular carbureted car like a Pinto or a Flathead? A dry kit is not best used at all.
I wouldn't use it. Don't just get a dry kit, especially with a carbureted car. Just don't do it. Fuel injection is the only way that I would do it, but I would add more fuel. So technically, then at that point,
If I was to guess here, like, okay, say we had to use this dry kit, say it had to be on a carbureted car, what would I do? I would probably go get a carb spacer and I would drill a hole in it and I would put a fuel injector that's like a massive fuel injector in that sucker.
Yeah.
Right? And I would run one line of fuel to it with an electric pump feeding just that injector. And I would set the pressure at, say, like 40 pounds. And I would have that injector come on full bore when the nitrous kit came on. Yeah. That's the only way to really crutch it. But I would not. You're asking for a meltdown, an engine meltdown.
Yeah. And there's actually another question here. Dakota, Mr. Dakota's Timeout's asking a really great question here. He's asking, I've got a I know it's Dunkhoff 3030 cam, a small box Chevrolet, and since it's not as aggressive as a new cams, could I use hydraulic lifters on it? Well, here's the problem with that is that a solid flat tappet cam is measured differently than a hydraulic cam. Now, a hydraulic cam, this is going to be hard to conceive, but from advertised on hydraulic is going to be at, say, 5 thousandths lift. Some do them at 6 thousandths, but they're right in there. And then they'll have their duration at 50. Now, hydraulic cams from 5 thousandths to 50 are much faster than solids. Solids are usually done as far as advertised at, say, 20, because that's where the lash, after lash, that's where it starts to open the valve. And then 20, and then it goes to 50. So if you notice that on a solid, when it goes from, say, 5 thousandths lift, which you're not even really using at all, you're not even seeing any of it, to where it takes up that slack and then actually starts to open up the valve, they're moving really slow. And what that's for, so that way it can just take up the slack to the valve, and then it exponentially ramps in. So here's what's going to happen. This happens to a lot of people. They put the hydraulic lifters on a solid cam, especially one that's kind of like this, not really aggressive, so it's even slower, so it's even worse. And what's going to happen is that your camshaft now, it's going to be so big because the hydraulic is essentially going to be opening that thing so slow. So you're going to have blowdown happening. You're going to have all these things happening, and the cam's going to act like a much bigger cam than it really is. But you're going to have so much tremendous overlap with that. It will run. It may make power, but it's going to be leaving so much power on the table. It's not worth it. And I personally wouldn't run hydraulic lifters on anything unless it was like a cheater system. Now, if
Like
you
you
take the
had to for
hydraulic,
class racing, yeah.
yeah, exactly, for class racing. Now, if you are just have to run a hydraulic lifter, take that hydraulic lifter, take all the internals out of it, and run it at 20,000 slash, and then that will basically work about the same as a solid. But then you won't be getting all that extra blowdown. Or I would even go one even further. If you really want to run that, you could set it at, say, 10 thousandths of lash from 10 thousandths from basically bottoming out. But then you're going to run into some of the same issues, is that you're going to have a much bigger camshaft. Blowdown's going to happen, and you're going to have it's just not going to run all that well.
I'm gonna tell you something right now. What I know, like, okay, Duntop 3030 is what actually came in like the 67 to 69 Z28 302s. Okay,
Do
that
you
was
know what the 3030 stands for?
I want to say it has something to do with duration or lift
Yeah,
or
it's
something.
30 thousandths more intake and exhaust than factory.
Okay,
Yeah.
they sound so
I'm
bitchin'. They
I'm
sound
sorry,
so
30
bitchin',
degrees more. 30 degrees more than factory. So not 30 thousandths. 30 degrees more than factory. Sorry.
but they sound so bitchin' in one of those Z28s that like, because they're just like a slant six, not performance wise, but if you ever heard a solid flat tappet cam slant six, they sound like a sewing machine. They're just constantly running, but it sounds so good, right? Because it's literally like a whole bunch of them going at the same time. That Duntop 3030 sounds the same way. I just buy a good set of old style solid flat tappet lifters. Don't buy anything new, right? Get on eBay, find a set that's got the part number stamped on it, okay? Because everything from like 1995 up has a laser engraved computer printed part number on them, and that's how you can tell the old school ones. Go find yourself some old school ones that's got a stamped part number on them, and I'd run those solid flat tappets on that Duntov and not worry about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And Fab's saying the same thing. Dry kit equals destroyed engine. 100%.
Yeah, dry kit. The okay, for the people that were running around on the street that were into Fast and the Furious, they were the ones buying the dry kits. Okay, for the real hot rodder groups, that's only half a nitrous system.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. You don't use the kit without the freaking fuel solenoid.
So Clayton's Toolbox asking a really good question here. Reverse pattern, manual valve body versus standard, pros, cons on the street strip car. Okay. Reverse pattern on a race car is awesome because you're staying away from neutral and reverse as you get faster. The cons is that when you're driving it on the street is that you have to always cross over first gear when you're say in drive or whatever to get it into neutral. Sometimes I've actually had my old shifter stick, and then basically the exact opposite is true for a street car. On a street car, having a reverse pattern sometimes does suck because you're going to have to change the shifter and whatnot. But I'm telling you right now, the reverse pattern, if it's a race car or a strip car that you're going to drag race and it's a quarter-mile drag race, I would just go with the reverse pattern. But usually a reverse pattern is going to have is going to be like a full manual, like say valve body, and you're going to have it freewheel in neutral. Here's the problem with that on a street car is that a lot of people will get on the throttle in first gear, let off of it, and then get back on it. If you have a 727 or a 904 and you do that, there is a possibility of that overrun clutch coming through the floorboard. So they have a tendency to have a problem with that. Now, Cope does sell a low band apply, but for that, if you're in, physical first gear, but if it's anything you're going to take to the strip, I would definitely have a reverse pattern.
Yeah, just like he said, the whole purpose of it is to keep you from throwing the shifter in the same direction of reverse, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Is like if you've ever seen what happens. I was at a drag strip one time when I saw one of these cars race that actually had a regular valve body pattern in it, and the dude threw it up into neutral, wide open. It was on an 8th mile track. It was about 600 foot out on a 660 track, and threw that sucker right into freaking reverse.
Yeah.
and it locked up the tires, and it had slicks on it, so it locked them up and then started doing a burnout while going forward while the tires were going reverse, and it ended up rolling the car.
Yeah. John Wilburn's right on this one. Reverse pattern is all there should be. I agree with that. In when it's a manual style, I would say that there only should be a reverse pattern if it's a manual valve body. I understand why they did the standard, so that way you could put it into like a stock car and you could have a stock style shifter in it, but it gets really, really, really sketchy at that point. And it's funny that you say that, because that's exactly what happened to a person I saw at the track. He had one of those. Remember the old ratchet shifters, the mega shifters? Remember those?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You put it, you go down, and then you would just hit it forward, and it was like a ratchet shifter. Yeah, he did that, and when he was going into drive, he just hit it just right, and I guess it like bounced off his hand, came back, and then he hit it again into neutral. Same thing happened. He was on the top end of the track. This was actually at Carlsbad, and it was just past the 8th mile mark, so he was really getting into it by that point, and the same type of thing happened. Neutral, but it didn't hit reverse. It just went into neutral and basically just exploded the engine. He couldn't stop in time, and then ended up rolling the car. Same exact scenario. So yeah. He is okay. Tall Garage. So do Hemi combustion chambers need less compressor because they're more prone to detonation, like 10-1? On the LS, we slam boost in it all day with the E85. In a Hemi, going to be upset? No. Hemis love compression, and the only reason why they're prone to detonation is because I'm assuming you're talking about a Gen 3, is because it's such a good chamber. It's such a great chamber. It doesn't need much timing at all. 22 to 25.
He's talking about that 241 Hemi, I think, from earlier.
Oh, I didn't see it.
So it'd be a really small bore. That's what's killing that one. That's what's causing detonation in that one. Is the small bore. Yeah.
I didn't see that. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was a Gen 3. Let's see here. Where's it at?
Yeah, just like all engines that have like a canted valve style or hemispherical head with the opposing valve style, those heads are very efficient. They don't need a lot of ignition timing, like Shane was saying. But if they're generally prone, are they prone to? I don't know.
I've never messed with a 241. I've only done 354s, 331s, and 392s in the Gen 1.
Well, the 241 has to have like a 3.5-inch bore.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right?
I really don't know on that one.
Yeah. But I do know they're like any other canted valve, or they love cylinder pressure. And if you can keep them from detonating, they are going to run hard for what they are.
And the Hemi wants RPM because that's actually because they're really good ports for that. Typically, a big block Chevrolet is going to beat a Hemi, even a Gen 2 or whatever, out of the hole. This will make more torque, but the Hemi on the top end will just start charging.
Right.
So he's actually saying...
Yeah, the big block Chevrolet was the Gen 1. Okay. So the big block Chevrolet is just like your Cleveland Ford. It's got the best of both worlds. It's still kind of a wedge head, and it's still very
canted
similar
valve,
to it has the attributes. What they did was try to split the difference. You had either hemispherical or you had wedge style heads, and when they came up with the canted valve, it was the compromise between the two, and you were supposed to get the good attributes from the hemispherical head as well as the good attributes from the wedge head.
Yep. So I would say put compression on it and let her eat. That's what I would say.
That's an old school Hemi. Oh, dude, I'll bet you that block. I bet you can go 200 over on that. I would find out how far you could take it. And
I don't know. I know nothing about the 241.
Yeah, I give it as much bore as you possibly could. Just like any other engine out there, the bigger the bore, the better generally, because it can breathe better.
It unshrouds the valves. And Hemis are typically unshrouded to begin with, the better.
Right.
Because it's going towards the center. Fab. You see, he's saying it's been a while. However, the 241 is very timing sensitive, even in low compression. See, I know nothing about the 241, so I know nothing about the 241. I'll do some research on it, and I mean, I do work for like Edelbrock, so I do have all the archive information for everything, so I can look at whatever I
Yeah,
like. So
I'm certain it has something to do with that small bore. It being that small cubic inch, the bore I knew had to be small.
I would like to know the rod and stroke ratio. If it's timing sensitive, it could be that it has a really long rod.
Real long rod and a kind of pretty long stroke for what it is.
It could be because that's when you become sensitive. If you have a really like say a lower rod to stroke ratio, like in a 148, they'll tend to be you'll have a lot of piston speed right at the top coming down, so it's really less prone to detonation. But if it's got a long rod, that's why the Slant 6, even though it's got a crappy head, it's got this super long rod, so super prone to detonation on that.
Well, Ken just sent me his. He had it sonic checked, and here's all the sonic check results.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You
He
can
says,
board. Yeah, you can board this thing quite a bit.
what kind of numbers?
Well, it's showing most of them. Well, I guess so. That one would be out, but they're actually most of them are really close to
It's
200
showing the stroke is
200,000.
showing the stroke is
200,000.
3.25 stroke.
Yeah, it's almost 200,000s.
Wow.
But there's some of them that are in spots 186,
See,
179.
that's probably on the non-thrust side. That's why I always check them in 4 spots. You want the thickest part of the material on the thrust side.
Well, yeah, they are. The thickest part of the material is on the thrust side.
Yeah.
But it's still, when you get your thrust side saying virtually a quarter of an inch, and your non-thrust side saying 195, you can't bore it any more than 160, right?
Well, everyone has their own theory on this. I wouldn't go under 150 on the non-thrust side.
Hey, you know what? I was just thinking, with that thing having that small bore like that, we were talking about this not too long ago.
Here,
The Slant
right here.
6 has a small bore like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the piston, the go-to replacement piston for those? 2.2 turbo?
Yeah, 2.2 turbo.
I wonder if a 2.2 turbo would be an ideal situation, or this would be a good spot.
No.
Well, no, because they need a dome.
Dome, yeah, because those have a big dome on them, and those things are really heavy pistons. So it's a 345 bore with a 325 stroke. So I'm not sure what the rod is on that one. That's something I'm going to play around with. Yeah, I've never really messed with the 241s.
Well, there's generally two things that make them prone to detonation, and really, if you look at a big picture, is rod to stroke ratio, and then quench pad. A Hemi doesn't have a lot of quench pad because it's not a closed chamber head. It's a freaking hemispherical open chamber, essentially what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And that may be the problem of it. I don't know. But see, the later Hemis don't have those problems.
No.
So, yeah, I wonder it has, because and the heads have to be the same type of chamber.
Well, the later model heads have a twin plug in them, and some of the Apache heads and the Eagle heads actually have a quench area on them.
Oh, they have a quench pad?
Yeah. So they have a quench pad in the head. If you look at say like an Eagle head on a 5.7, it has a quench pad in there, and so it tightens up. That's why they have really small CCs, and that's why if you put like say an Eagle head on a 6.1, that was like the hot ticket to do. You had to change the head gaskets a lot, otherwise your compression is going to be like 12 and a half, 13 to 1, and a lot of people didn't know that.
You know what? I just thought of this. That 241 Hemi is so old because that would have been early Chrysler stuff, like 54, 5, 6, 7, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Right? I'll bet you this is a small bore, small stroke. But you remember there used to be like 5 different Hemis, and they were all by 3 different manufacturers.
Red Ram and all that other stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And they may have shared one common block. So to do that, you make yours 241 cubic inches, and there's another one that's 310 or whatever.
Oh, yeah. So change this stroke with this piston.
Right, but it's got the same deck height for all of them. So what do you end up with? You end up with one that's got a tractor piston with like 16, thousandths or 16,000, 160 thousandths more compression height than the previous version of it,
Yeah.
right? And so it's got this big gargantuan piston with a really long rod, and it comes out to be a goofed up bore and stroke.
Yeah. Hey, what was that on the non-thrust side? What was the side? What was the thickness of that
The
block again?
non-thrust side. Well,
Non-thrust
no,
side.
it varies all over the place. This thing is about as inconsistent it gets, and I imagine that's because it's early casting
Yeah.
technology, right? But it shows
187. If it.
it shows 179, 173, 175, and then 265 on the fourth measurement that they did, which is I'm assuming at the bottom of the block.
Yeah, thrust. So at that point, I probably wouldn't go over like say 60 or 80.
Well, that's what Fab Race Mod Repeat says. That his pops
Oh.
told him that they won't go over 100. They shouldn't go over 100 on it.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just looking at by numbers.
But pistons that you could use in that combo, man, I'll tell you what would be cool is if you went and had a custom piston made for it, but you could base it off of like a 4.6 Ford because they got a board like that small, and then they use those real thin, super thin rings on them.
So it's got a 6-inch rod in it. So see, we got what was the stroke on this
That's a
thing?
lot of rod.
Yeah, 3.45. Divide that by 0.94. Oh, way around. 0.94. Divide that by 1. What was the stroke on this thing? 345.
325 stroke.
Yeah, that's a 172. So that's way up there. That's a high rod to stroke ratio. So it could just be the rod to stroke ratio.
Huh.
Could be it. But it's not terrible. I mean, 172 is pretty safe. That's where most Mopars are, anyways, in that range. So, John saying, how about
Mopars,
oh, is that
Mustangs,
Damien?
Mopars, Mustangs, and minivans video today. Yeah.
Working under tarp in the rain, no shop, no problem, right? Yeah, it's awesome. Man, it's going by. Man, it's 8:46 already.
I know. This one flew by tonight.
Yeah, this one went by fast.
Yeah, so Tall Garage is saying he's got some Honda Journal NASCAR rods. So he does the same thing as me, and he pieced them together out of the old NASCAR parts.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the best thing you're gonna buy for the buck, man.
Yeah. In fact, that's a lot of the stuff I had was when I was at Crower were some of the old rods that were like Honda journals or 2-inch journals with a 927 pin or the super small pin. And I can get them for cheap. I just had them cleaned up and then I just get a custom piston because, I used to do CP Carrillos all the time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know
Right
what
down
I'm
the
gonna do.
street.
Yeah, I have no clue what I'm gonna end up doing with my junk. But I did have a set of NASCAR rods that are 6.4 inches long, with the same thing with the Honda Journal, and except for the wrist pin on it says 708 wrist pin.
Yeah. Right.
Real small.
D150 saying, thank you guys for your time and info. You're welcome. That's what we're here for. Prefer you guys to the New York piece of work. Who's that?
Oh, he's probably talking about UTG.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't know he was from New York, so I didn't know that. Otherwise, I'd have skipped that. But yeah, that's actually, one thing about me and Dallas is we're not here doing this to get paid. We both have, I have another job. He's retired, technically. I'm possibly going to get another job, but
I'm going to have to get another job.
Yeah. So, we just do this for you guys.
Yeah, well, the whole point of it is like the sake of hot rodding, right? Like,
keep it alive.
Right. I mean, if you're a young kid and you're just learning how this stuff works and you got a carburetor and you were born after 1995, you've never seen one of those on a real car. You don't know what right looks like or sounds like or works like. And that's all we're trying to do is bridge the gap.
It's funny is that there was a time there where I could hear a car running and I could tell what headers they were running, what manufacturer it was.
Oh, really?
By the how thin the tube was, whose they were, because they had different sounds of the exhaust hitting the tin. So yeah, that was a while. Oh, Tall Garage saying $50 forged H beams off eBay, can't beat it with good planning. Yeah, I mean, why not? Right?
If it's the good NASCAR rods, what you would look for Lentz or Pankel or Crowler or some of the good stuff that they ran back in the day. I'm telling you right now, if it doesn't blow up under 900 horsepower at 9,000 RPM for 5 hours, it is definitely not going to blow up in your junk that's making 400 horsepower.
And a bad tune comparatively.
Right. And so it'll be totally fine at lower horsepower levels. And actually what's kind of cool about them is 900 horse, 9,000 RPM, you could probably just put a stock motor and a bunch of boost with that thing, and it probably still wouldn't give up the ghost.
No, exactly. And he did say something here, the H-beams. Here's one thing that, now, okay, it's a little controversy, and I'll do it as quick as I can, but I personally prefer I-beams. And there's a reason for it, and I'll get into it real quick, but H-beams are very common because an H-beam, technically in normal engine forces, key word here is normal engine forces, so you don't have any detonation, you don't have any blowback, you don't have anything going on. The physical thing of an H-beam, it's going to be stronger, right? It's going to be, I shouldn't use the word stronger. In that operation, it will be stronger there, but it can be more brittle because it is stronger in only one direction. Where an I-beam typically is pound for pound less strong, but because sometimes you don't always have normal operating forces, they will take it and then come back, so they have a little bit more elasticity in them. So because you with an H-beam, you're going to have less elasticity, they tend to break easier because even though they're stronger, it's kind of like the diamond effect, right? So everything that's in mine, anything that goes boost or anything that's power added or goes high RPM, I always prefer an I-beam for that reason. That's just how I do things. So, and you'll see a lot of people who are running really high horsepower with power adders. They'll have an I-beam. Also, too, H-beams tend to be a little heavier on the heavier side because you're going to have two essentially flat beams. Where an I-beam you can technically make slightly lighter.
I just look at my Navy days at damage control. Yep. You had the weakest type of shoring, I-type. You had the heaviest type of shoring, which was H-type. Mm-hmm. And then you had the in-between, which was the K-type. And they don't have this. This shoring is what, if your ship is sinking and the space is starting to buckle under the weight of the water, you would shore it up with pieces of wood, and they'd be shaped like rods. And they would tell you that the H-beam shoring takes twice as much strength as an I-beam. To each their own, I guess. I like an H-beam because, well, one, any Buick rod is $700, and I bought these for like $450. And if they came H-beam, I don't care if they came Y-beam, right? I mean, I literally saved a bunch of money, and these rods are way overkill for what I'm going to use them for.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
and First Responder Garage is actually saying this is exactly what I was just saying right here, is that he's saying that I-beam
doesn't allow flex or break.
No. That's I didn't read that correctly, but yeah, no, it's actually reversed. I-beam, because you're only going to have one beam going in the force of the crank, and then you're going to have two flats. So the one beam will allow flex. So yeah, and that's just is what that's straight from Crowler Mouth himself. Whenever they made an H-beam, it was only for NA applications. Yeah, we're getting down to the last few minutes. Anything you want to plug? Anything we got going on?
I don't think I really have anything to plug. I had a tree fall down in my front yard today. I went out and cleaned it up. I had to cut the big piece of it off, and it came and busted me in the nose. I think I may have broke my nose. I don't know.
You'll know tomorrow because you'll have two raccoon eyes.
Two black eyes, yep.
Yeah.
But it's sore right now. Man, is it sore.
And for those of you who weren't in at the beginning, what I'm going to be doing this week is I'm going to be on that Slant 6. I got the head off. I was checking it out as far as this is Gilbert slanted sled, I'm going to be checking, basically where the timing marks are, if they're accurate. And
I
then
was
I'm
just
gonna
going to
do the
ask, did you
camshaft.
see if the cam was lined up properly?
I haven't even taken that part off yet because
Oh, all right.
I want to make sure that TDC is TDC, because once again, this has got one of those timing covers where you put the timing mark and you bolt it to it, so it could be pretty much anywhere. So
Yeah. Well, let's hope that they didn't do something ridiculous like, hey, this crank is junk in this 64 block, so we'll just get any other slant six crank, and it's got like a keyway in a different spot, and so top dead center is all jacked up on it or something. Like,
yeah, or it could be that because where their timing marks are, they're wildly different, like by 30 degrees or more. It could be the same thing. Hey, let's get this aftermarket crankshaft, and with this older or this newer style harmonic balancer, and now nothing's competing, and it's just so retarded. But it
well,
idles
if you think about
really.
well, if you think about it though, I mean, think about if it was a later crankshaft that had a different keyway in a different spot, it would put the cam out of time with the crank, right? Because you're lining them up dot to dot, right? So when you're off 30 degrees on the crank,
I don't think the keyways are different on them. I've never seen that. Really, the harmonic balancers are slightly different. Harmonic balancer marks are in two different spots. So
well,
I don't think that's what it is. I think what it is, if it's not the cam, if it's none of that stuff is all correct, then it's got to be a timing issue.
I was looking at Clayton's toolbox here, asked a pretty cool question on our way out, right?
Yep.
Okay. In general, how much lighter is a Molly roll cage compared to a steel roll cage? I don't know. I would have to go out on a limb and say maybe 20 to 30% lighter. It's thinner tubing, right? Because it's stronger itself, and then it's smaller diameter. But the caveat is it can only be tigged into place for it to work properly. So then you're going to spend 2 or 3 times as much to have somebody welded in, because it's got to be a TIG welder. It's got to be TIG welded in.
And it's hard to say how much lighter it is going to be, because it depends on if you're going to do, like, say, a roll bar or an 8-point. It depends on what, 10 seconds or under, or up to 850, because the amount of cage is going to be it. But I was going to say I was going to guess between
20 30%. Yeah, my race car cage is chromoly, and I did that just for the sole purpose of weight. But I'll tell you what I do know. The UPS guy dropped that off at my house when I lived in Florida. I rang the doorbell, and I went to the door, and the guy handed me this entire roll cage tubing taped together with one hand and said, "Hey, here's your roll cage." And I'm like, that is pretty bitchin'. I mean, it's a whole freaking like 8-point cage setup.
Yeah. But other than that, that's really all I got. Is I got that going on, and once again, I'm going to try to get to the track, at least with the blue car, to get something going.
There you go. Fab Race Mod Repeat says Dallas 30%. They last half as long. Okay, well, great.
Dakota's timeout saying, just use some cage out of some old exhaust pipe.
Yeah,
I've seen a cage with fence post. I've seen a cage with fence post.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I guess until next week, I don't really have anything to plug. Is John's live? He's doing a live.
Yeah, John, what do you got going on this Friday?
Clayton Andrew Nelson says 40 pounds. Oh, okay, There you go.
Yeah, but that's hard to say, though. I mean, how much tubing are you going to use?
If it's a 10-point versus an 8-point,
that'd be a big difference. I in my car, I have just regular mild steel in mine. I didn't at that time. I still couldn't afford it, and so it just is what it is. And it's in there, and it's already been added onto, and it passes tech, so it's good to go. But if you are still around, we still got 47 people in here. John Wilburn, go to check out his channel on Friday night, 7 on his channel, which is John Wilburn, at 7 p.m. Central Time. Why is it so hard for me to remember 7 p.m. Central Time? Because I always know he's Eastern. So.
That's what screws me up, is 1 hour difference.
Yeah. And other than that, hopefully, John, you got anything going on? Let's see, he's saying right here, I'm doing different stuff this month. I'll do a Halloween theme live soon.
Oh, so there you go. Keep your eyeballs peeled for a Halloween themed live from John Wilburn.
Right.
It's drunks getting thrown out of a Halloween party.
Right. Yeah, so he's saying 7 to 9 Central. Yes, always Central, and 8 to 10 Eastern. And then if you're on the West Coast, that is 5 to 7. So there you go. You got it all covered. Oh, someone's saying PVC. Someone's saying he's seen conduit. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine conduit. Man. It's your life, man. Spend it. Right? Just spend the money. All right, guys. Well, we're getting close to the time, and I'm getting tired.
Yeah, me too. I know how my old timer friends would have answered that question. Like, well, duh. I plan on racing it and not wrecking it.
Right. but do you have to worry about the idiot in the other lane?
I know.
That's the problem.
There used to be a car that ran at Motion Raceway in like the 70s or early 80s called the Pro Buffalo. And it had an entire tube. That's the very first tube chassis car I've ever seen. And it was made out of exhaust tubing. And it had a Hemi in it running on like alcohol or nitromethane. It was injected Hemi. And it would leave. It would have one tire up and it would carry it all the way down the length of the track. One tire twisted up because the whole car would flex and just flimsy.
Wow. Scary. All right, guys. Well, there we're at 2 hours. And once again, if you didn't get something or you're watching this later on, you want to see something, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Once again, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Come on over and we'll check it out and I'll get your question answered. Or you might even be a hardcore tech talk like we did with Jeff at Two Hacks. So anyways, I guess we're going to be out, guys. You guys have a good week.
See you next week.
See you next week. All right. You guys take it